In this space, we dive into historical events to help you relax and fall asleep beneficially. Make sure to engage actively, as by the end of our tale, you'll be deep in sleep. Close your eyes and let's begin. It's been over 2,500 years since this mysterious island, known as Atlantis, became the subject of research. It fascinates scientists and dreamers, appearing in literature and film, inspiring people worldwide. Since ancient times, starting with the philosopher Plato, humanity has wondered, could this great island, inhabited by a thriving civilization, have existed and disappeared without a trace? Or is it just a beautiful legend born from imagination? People have searched for Atlantis in various corners, from the Atlantic Ocean to the shores of America and even near Antarctica. Some considered it the cradle of human civilization, while others envisioned it as a vast city with technologies far ahead of its time. Theories emerged about a mysterious race of giants who built astonishing structures. Questions about the existence and disappearance of Atlantis remain unanswered, and each new version deepens the mystery. Over the centuries, numerous legends and theories have arisen around Atlantis. But what does modern science say? Can contemporary technology, archaeology, and geology help unveil this enigmatic page of human history? We'll embark on an exciting journey through the ages. We'll start with the first mentions of Atlantis in ancient texts, move through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, explore hypotheses from the 19th and 20th centuries, then discover the latest scientific discoveries and research. Together, we'll try to determine where myth ends and reality begins in the story of Atlantis. The concept of Atlantis is associated with the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who first told about the mysterious land that became one of the most famous legends. Over 2,000 years ago, in the age before our era, Plato wrote two well-known philosophical dialogues titled Timaeus and Critias. These works not only contain philosophical reflections, but also narrate the story of a long-lost civilization that existed long before classical Greece. In his dialogues, Plato describes a conversation among wise men, including the historical figure Solon, who lived about 200 years before Plato. According to the narrative, Solon traveled to Egypt, where he met with the priests of the temple in the city of Sais. These priests shared an ancient tale about a powerful island, Atlantis, which thrived thousands of years ago and suddenly vanished due to a catastrophe. Returning to Athens, Solon recounted this story to his relative Dropides, who passed it down to his son Critias the elder, and he to his grandson Critias the younger, who became a participant in the dialogues. Plato tells this legend through the voice of the philosopher Critias, giving the narrative an illusion of historical authenticity and persuasiveness, leading to the perception of Atlantis as a real event from the distant past. Plato provides a detailed geographical description of the island, forming the basis for searches and speculations about its location. He claims that Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which the ancient Greeks considered the boundary of their known world, a strait now known as the Strait of Gibraltar. This description clearly points to the Atlantic Ocean, which the Greeks viewed as a vast and mysterious expanse. Plato depicts Atlantis as a large land area, significantly exceeding any known territory. The island was bigger than Libya and Asia combined. At the center of this island stood a magnificent capital, built in an unusual way. The city consisted of several concentric rings of land and water, connected by bridges and canals, making it both protected and beautiful. The Atlanteans achieved significant advancements in engineering and architecture. Their capital exemplified a well-thought-out urban infrastructure, with an extensive network of canals supporting transportation and thriving trade. Convenient ports and docks were also created, facilitating effective commerce. The Atlanteans were skilled shipbuilders and navigators, allowing them to develop trade links with distant lands. An essential element of Atlantis' architecture was the Temple of Poseidon, located on the central island of the capital. According to Plato, this temple was an impressive structure with walls covered in gold and silver. Inside stood a golden statue of Poseidon on a chariot, drawn by winged horses. The temple served not only as a religious center, but also as a symbol of the cultural and technological development of the Atlanteans. They also created a modern water supply and sewage system, ensuring a high level of sanitation. Powerful fortifications, walls, and towers, built with great skill, protected the city from threats and emphasized its grandeur. However, according to Plato, Atlantis wasn't perfect. Over time, its inhabitants lost their moral compass and became proud, greedy, and cruel. Forgetting the values that made them great, they sought absolute power over other peoples and faced punishment. Ultimately, the gods decided to punish Atlantis for its arrogance by triggering a terrible natural disaster. As a result of powerful earthquakes and floods, the island disappeared underwater in just one day, leaving behind only a legend and a mystery for future generations. Plato's account is so detailed and convincing that for many centuries, people perceived it as real historical testimony. Nevertheless, even in ancient times, some writers expressed doubts about the truth of this story and questioned the existence of Atlantis. Was it a real place, or merely a philosophical allegory created by Plato to illustrate his views on morality, pride, and the consequences inevitably arising from arrogance? Modern researchers also actively discuss the reliability of the sources Plato cites. Many conclude that Plato might have relied on various ancient myths and oral traditions. However, we lack real historical evidence to confirm the authenticity of his account. Some scholars believe that the narrative about Atlantis was fictional, crafted by Plato to convey his philosophical ideas and moral lessons. Others suggest he might have indeed heard a similar story in Egypt, though specific proof for this has also not been found. Thus, scholars' attitudes toward Plato's sources remain cautious and critical, emphasizing that the story of Atlantis is primarily an intriguing and mysterious tale from an ancient philosopher. Although Plato is the main and virtually only significant ancient Greek author who detailed Atlantis, the ancient Greeks had mixed feelings about this story. Already in his time, contemporaries and close followers debated whether to consider this story true or merely a philosophical invention. For example, Plato's student, the renowned philosopher Aristotle, viewed his teacher's account with skepticism. He saw Atlantis as a parable created to illustrate philosophical and moral ideas. From Aristotle's perspective, the story of Atlantis lacked a real historical foundation and was merely symbolic. The ancient Greek geographer Strabo also expressed doubts about the authenticity of Atlantis. In his writings, he referenced Plato's account, noting that the description of the island is perceived more as an allegorical story than a historical fact. Plutarch, another famous ancient Greek author, also mentioned Atlantis, viewing it in the context of an allegorical narrative with more moral than historical significance. Egyptian tradition significantly influenced the formation of the Atlantis legend. Plato claimed that Solon initially heard this story from Egyptian priests. The priests from the city of Sais said they had preserved tales of Atlantis for thousands of years. They pointed out that the Greeks lost their ancient knowledge due to constant destruction and disasters, while traditions in Egypt endured through generations. The temple of the goddess Neith in Sais, where Solon learned about Atlantis, served as an important center of knowledge and repository of ancient texts. Egyptian culture was renowned for its unique system of recording historical and mythological events passed down through generations. The Egyptian priests might have possessed information about events from a distant past, based on ancient records on papyri and temple walls documenting various natural disasters, wars, and significant events. Egyptian historical and religious texts often mention large floods, earthquakes, and other natural calamities, which could have inspired the tale of Atlantis' demise. Egyptian priests likely used such ancient legends in conversations with Solon, emphasizing the importance of remembering disasters to warn against the consequences of arrogance and neglecting the gods. Solon's role in this story is also vital. The Athenian legislator indeed visited Egypt to study the laws, wisdom, and historical knowledge of this ancient people. Numerous ancient sources confirm that Solon was known for his quest for knowledge drawn from the experiences of other civilizations to improve life in Athens. Thus, his appeal to Egyptian priests for ancient wisdom seems historically justified. Even though we lack direct Egyptian written sources mentioning Atlantis, the very idea of an Egyptian origin for the tale appears quite plausible from a historical perspective. The Atlantis legend also linked not only to Egypt and Greece. The connection between Atlantis and ancient American civilizations began attracting attention after the discovery of the New World in the late 15th century. The first Spanish conquistadors and explorers were amazed by encounters with previously unknown cultures like the Maya, Aztecs, and Incas. These peoples had such a high level of development that Europeans wondered if the inhabitants of these mysterious lands could be descendants of some ancient civilization, possibly even that same Atlantis Plato wrote about. One of the first to seriously consider a possible link between Atlantis and Central American cultures was the Spanish monk and chronicler Bartolomé de las Casas. Observing the majestic cities of the Maya and Aztecs, their impressive pyramids, complex writing systems, and accurate calendars, he suggested that such high achievements couldn't have arisen by chance. Las Casas and other Spanish chroniclers of that time noted that the cultural level of the peoples of America vastly contradicted their notions of savages and was comparable to the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. Therefore, they began seeking explanations for such high achievements in legends about the ancient fallen states. The association between the pyramidal structures of ancient American civilizations and Egyptian pyramids particularly captured the European imagination. Although these structures differed significantly in purpose and internal structure, the concept of the pyramid as an architectural expression of monumentality led researchers to consider possible contacts between ancient peoples across the Atlantic Ocean. They believed that the inhabitants of Atlantis might have been the first to carry these ideas and architectural principles across the ocean, thus founding civilizations on the American continent. The mythological similarities also sparked great interest. One of the most striking examples of such parallels is the legend of the god Quetzalcoatl and similar characters in the mythologies of other Central and South American peoples. Quetzalcoatl, or the feathered serpent, was one of the principal deities of Mesoamerica, credited with bringing knowledge, writing, calendars, crafts, agriculture, and laws to humanity. After the Spanish conquest, chroniclers began describing him as a light-skinned and bearded god who came from across the sea, although such descriptions are absent in pre-Columbian sources. According to some legends of the Aztecs and Maya, Quetzalcoatl left his people after fulfilling his mission, promising to return one day. These late Spanish descriptions of a supposedly light-skinned and bearded deity arriving across the ocean inspired researchers and authors to hypothesize a possible connection between ancient American civilizations and the legendary Atlantis. This image of a cultural hero became particularly appealing to Europeans, contrasting sharply with the typical depictions of gods in Mesoamerica. Similar legends can also be found among the Incas, who spoke of their ancestors arriving from across the ocean and founding the first settlements, which later transformed into a mighty empire. These tales of a distant homeland and migration across vast waters sparked interest and research. Lost worlds captivated Europeans familiar with the legend of Atlantis' demise as described by Plato. Myths from the peoples of Central and South America also mention great calamities that force people to leave their lands and seek new horizons. These disaster stories, akin to legends from other ancient cultures, reignited interest in Atlantis as a potential basis for such myths. Nevertheless, modern historians and archaeologists approach such theories with caution. They believe that coincidences may be explained by common living conditions, similar architectural solutions, and universal myths familiar to all humanity. Archaeological finds and genetic studies show that the civilizations of the Maya, Aztecs, and Incas developed independently and had no contact with the peoples of the Old World until Europeans discovered America in the late 15th century. Although the scientific community does not recognize a connection between Atlantis and the ancient civilizations of America, interest in this mysterious island has not waned, continuing to intrigue researchers and travelers for centuries. This was especially evident during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, when the legend of Atlantis re-emerged in the maps and texts of European authors. Medieval cartographers and travelers depicted not only known lands, but also mysterious islands based on ancient legends. One such island was Antilia, which frequently appeared on maps, provoking various speculations about its origins. Renaissance explorers linked it to Plato's Atlantis, suggesting that it was the same lost island. Another mysterious island was Brazil, or High Brazil, considered unreachable and sometimes disappearing into mist, reappearing in certain years. Although today it's deemed mythical, many believed in its existence during the Middle Ages and associated it with Atlantis. Particular attention was drawn to the map by the Turkish admiral Piri Reis, created in 1513. This map remarkably accurately depicted the eastern coastline of South America, especially its Brazilian part, astonishing scholars even today, considering the limited geographical knowledge of that time. Piri Reis himself claimed to have used about 20 different sources, including ancient maps he said were created by Alexander the Great, as well as the lost map of Christopher Columbus. The mystery surrounding these sources generated numerous hypotheses. Some researchers, like Professor Charles Hapgood and writer Graham Hancock, suggested that Piri Reis's map might have been based on much older sources linked to a hypothetical civilization they associated with Atlantis. They specifically argued that the map could have depicted Antarctica without ice. Although modern studies consider this a distortion of the image of South America, the scientific community believes that Piri Reis's map is a unique compilation of the available cartographic data and knowledge at that time. Despite inaccuracies and mythical elements, this map serves as an important historical artifact, showcasing the level of geographical knowledge in the early 16th century and humanity's desire to explore unknown lands. The Renaissance marked a time of renewed interest in the legacy of ancient culture. After a long period of neglect, humanists began studying and translating the texts of ancient Greeks and Romans, with Platon's dialogues regaining popularity. Scholars of that era saw in these texts possible historical evidence, adding special significance to the story of a sunken civilization. Interest in Atlantis intensified due to the great geographical discoveries, prompting European intellectuals to ponder the origins of the developed peoples of the New World. During this period, many scholars began to consider the hypothesis linking American civilizations to Plato's Atlantis. They sought explanations for similarities in architecture, religion, and social systems between the Old and New World peoples, turning to ancient texts for answers. Beyond academic interest, humanists viewed Atlantis as a symbol of a lost golden age, perfectly aligning with their quest to revive ancient wisdom. In the 16th century, as modern science and a new rational approach to knowledge emerged in Europe, Atlantis not only remained remembered, but also gained a new stature. If it was once seen as a myth or philosophical allegory, it began to be examined from a scientific perspective. scholars started to wonder whether Atlantis could have truly existed, and if so, where it might have been and what real events could have inspired Plato. One of the first researchers to attempt to explain the origin of the Atlantis legend was Swedish scholar Olof Rudbeck. In his work published in the late 17th century, he claimed that the myth of the sunken island was based on real events that occurred in northern Europe. Rudbeck believed that Plato's ancient Atlantis was in fact prehistoric Sweden, where a great civilization was destroyed by a natural catastrophe. Although modern science rejects Rudbeck's hypothesis, his attempt at scientific analysis of the myth marked an important step, demonstrating how scholars can use archaeological and historical data to study ancient legends. Interest in Atlantis became even more pronounced in the 16th century, especially among Enlightenment figures eager to rethink ancient traditions from a rational standpoint. Scholar Jean-Sylvain Bailly and philosopher Lord Mambado proposed their hypotheses regarding Atlantis' existence. Bailly believed the legend reflected memories of an ancient civilization that existed near the North Pole before climate change. He thought this civilization spread its knowledge worldwide after it had to leave its lands due to worsening climatic conditions. Lord Mambado, adhering to rationalist ideals, viewed Atlantis as a symbol of an ancient and powerful civilization, perhaps the origin of the most progressive cultures of antiquity, such as Egypt and Greece. He did not search for Atlantis in a specific geographical location, but believed Plato's writings referred to a lost common homeland of humanity, the memories of which survive in folk myths and legends. The 15th century marked the beginning of systematic archaeological research, although they had yet to achieve the scientific rigor and scale characteristic of later periods. Interest in Atlantis grew alongside discoveries confirming the existence of ancient civilizations that vanished due to catastrophes. For instance, excavations in Pompeii and Herculaneum in Italy demonstrated how suddenly and tragically entire cities and cultures can disappear. These discoveries reinforced ideas that the Atlantis legend might be based on real historical events reflecting genuine natural disasters. During the Enlightenment, the approach to Atlantis began to be viewed as a puzzle that could be solved through rational analysis, relying on historical data and logic. Enlightenment thinkers rejected mystical explanations, striving to see Atlantis not as a myth, but as a historical memory that could shed light on humanity's ancient history and the roots of various cultural traditions. The 19th century became a time of particularly intense interest in Atlantis. This period saw the emergence of numerous hypotheses, sometimes quite unusual and even fantastic, aiming not only to confirm the island's existence, but also to explain its place in humanity's ancient history. Atlantis became a focal point of widespread fascination and active scientific and pseudoscientific debates, sparking both serious research and speculative theories. One of the key figures in bringing Atlantis back into public attention was American politician, writer, and history enthusiast Ignatius Donnelly. In 1882, he published his famous work, which quickly became an international bestseller. Donnelly not only claimed that Atlantis existed, but also described it as a highly developed and vast continent, inhabited by a powerful civilization from which all ancient cultures, both Old World and New World, descended. One of Donnelly's most original and vivid theories suggested that the Atlanteans could have been members of a race of giants. He referenced ancient myths and legends from various peoples that mentioned giants living on Earth in ancient times. Donnelly believed these myths might preserve memories of real giant people from the vanished Atlantean civilization. In his book, he cited numerous accounts of large bones and giant remains, although modern archaeologists and anthropologists considered this evidence dubious and mythical. Donnelly divided the inhabitants of Atlantis into two main races. The first race, he claimed, consisted of tall, fair-skinned giants distinguished by remarkable physical traits and extensive knowledge. The second race was shorter and darker skinned, which Donnelly believed became the precursor to the peoples that later populated America and Africa. These ideas helped him explain not only the origins of ancient civilizations, but also the mysterious structures found around the world. Donnelly paid special attention to the similarities between architectural monuments in America and the Old World, particularly the pyramids in Egypt, Mexico, and Peru. He argued that such an astonishing coincidence of forms and technologies could only have arisen from a single common source, which he believed was Atlantis. Donnelly was convinced that after the catastrophe that destroyed the island, the surviving Atlanteans migrated to the continents on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, spreading their knowledge and technology. He also noted the mythological parallels. In flood myths, found in nearly all ancient cultures, Donnelly saw a reflection of one real catastrophe that destroyed Atlantis. He argued that the flood described by Plato may have persisted in human memory as a shared ancient tale. Despite the widespread resonance of his hypothesis, serious scholars approached Donnelly's ideas with skepticism. Archaeologists and anthropologists criticized him for lacking rigorous evidence, making arbitrary and superficial comparisons between cultures, and ignoring significant differences among them. Nonetheless, his work significantly influenced popular consciousness and shaped an entire field of study on Atlantis, which remains popular today. Besides Donnelly's theory, the 19th century also saw hypotheses linking Atlantis to mysterious ancient cultures in Africa. Researchers began to focus on ancient rock paintings and enigmatic stone structures. In the desert regions of North Africa, ideas emerged suggesting that before the Sahara became a desert, a highly developed civilization existed there, possibly connected to the mythical Atlantis. These hypotheses were based on ancient legends and myths from African peoples about lost cities, submerged beneath sands or hidden in the waters of vast lakes and rivers that once covered significant areas of the modern African continent. Many pseudo-scientific and mystical theories related to Atlantis in the 20th century were significantly enriched by the prophecy of a well-known American clairvoyant, dubbed the Sleeping Prophet by his contemporaries. His unusual predictions, made in a deep trance state, not only gave the legend new popularity, but also encouraged enthusiasts to search for the lost island in the most unexpected corners of the world. This clairvoyant claimed that Atlantis indeed existed and was the greatest civilization of antiquity, possessing incredible knowledge and technologies that surpassed modern scientific achievements. According to him, the civilization of the Atlanteans was destroyed by a global catastrophe that occurred around 10,000 years ago. However, he went much further than most of his predecessors, detailing not only the location of Atlantis' demise, but also predicting its discovery in the future. One of the most intriguing aspects of his prophecies was the belief that Atlantis would rise again to the ocean's surface near the shores of North America, specifically of the Bahama Islands. He asserted that remnants of ancient structures would be found in that area, which would conclusively confirm the existence of Atlantis. This prophet even indicated that the discovery of these remains would take place at the end of the 20th century. These predictions inspired numerous archaeological and amateur expeditions, especially after a mysterious stone structure named the Bimini Road was indeed discovered off the coast of one of the islands. This unusual object consisted of large stone slabs neatly arranged on the seabed and immediately became the subject of heated debate. Followers of the clairvoyant were convinced that this was precisely the object he described, namely, the remains of an ancient Atlantic civilization. Scientists, however, took a much more critical stance on this finding. Research conducted by geologists led to an interesting hypothesis that the Bimini Road could have been a natural formation resulting from the effects of tides, erosion, and the seabed. Despite the enthusiasm of supporters of the Casey theory, serious scientific work found no evidence supporting the artificial origin of these formations. Most scholars consider Casey's predictions unfounded and lacking scientific basis. However, the Bimini Road was not the only archaeological object that evoked associations with Atlantis. In the mid-20th century, researchers actively studied other ancient civilizations, seeking evidence or at least hints of Atlantis' existence. Special attention was given to the island of Crete, where British archaeologist Arthur Evans discovered the Minoan culture in the early 20th century. Although Evans didn't directly associate the Minoans with Atlantis, many researchers saw this mysterious and advanced civilization as potential Atlanteans or their descendants. The Minoans were skilled seafarers, built magnificent palaces with advanced water supply and sewage systems, and possessed a script that remains only partially deciphered. These achievements impressed scholars and seemed to match descriptions of the Atlantic civilization. Another significant archaeological site inspired by the legend of Atlantis became the Azores Islands. Some researchers believe these islands, located in the Atlantic Ocean, could be remnants of a vast continent submerged underwater. Despite the lack of systematic studies that could confirm the presence of ancient ruins, enthusiasts continue to seek traces of ancient structures on the ocean floor. The popularity of Edgar Cayce's predictions and the discovery of the Bimini Road contributed to the myth of Atlantis transcending academic science and becoming part of popular culture, esoteric teachings, and mystical movements. Despite the allure of these ideas, most professional scholars regard Cayce's theories and similar ones as pseudo-scientific, based on fantasies without substantial evidence. Nevertheless, numerous archaeological expeditions and discoveries made in the 20th century demonstrated that ancient human history harbors many mysteries, and interest in the legend of Atlantis remains high, uniting science, mythology, and mysticism. Serious scientific theories also began to develop in the 20th century, striving to find a real historical basis for the legend outlined by Plato. Among the proposed hypotheses, the most convincing became the connection between the legendary Atlantis and the previously mentioned Minoan civilization, as well as the catastrophic eruption of a volcano on the island of Santorini in the Aegean Sea. This theory was first suggested in the early 20th century and actively developed over the following decades, thanks to archaeological discoveries and geological research. The main argument of supporters of this version was the massive eruption of the Thera volcano, which occurred around the mid-2nd millennium BCE, several centuries before Plato's time. This event is considered one of the largest volcanic disasters in human history. The eruption on Santorini was so powerful that it altered the geography of the Aegean region. The central part of the island was destroyed, creating a vast caldera filled with seawater. Following the eruption, a tsunami occurred, reaching heights of several tens of meters, flooding the coasts of neighboring islands and mainland Greece, including Crete. Crete, the homeland of the Minoan civilization, suffered particularly severely from this catastrophe. The Minoans were one of the most advanced cultures in the Mediterranean, featuring complex architecture, multi-story palaces, developed water supply and sewage systems, as well as writing and art. The magnificent palaces of Knossos, Phaistos, and Malia, known to archaeologists, testify to the high level of Minoan society's development. Researchers believe that the disaster caused by the eruption on Santorini could have had a significant impact on the fate of the Minoan civilization. The enormous tsunami triggered by the explosion destroyed coastal settlements and ports of Crete, disrupting maritime trade connections and undermining the Minoans' economic and political standing in the region. While the civilization did not vanish instantly, the disaster dealt a powerful blow, after which Minoan society gradually declined and was eventually absorbed by other peoples, particularly the Mycenaean Greeks. Scientists suggest that the memory of this massive natural disaster might have lingered in the collective consciousness of Mediterranean peoples as legends of a sunken island or civilization. Centuries later, these tales could have been interpreted and transformed by ancient Egyptians, then passed on to Greek sages like Solon, and ultimately recounted by Plato as the story of the fall of the mighty Atlantis. One significant piece of evidence for this theory became the numerous archaeological finds on Santorini, made in the latter half of the 20th century. Here, beneath layers of volcanic ash, the remains of the city of Akrotiri were discovered, often referred to as Minoan Pompeii. Excavations revealed that the city was a thriving trade and cultural hub, well preserved because its inhabitants managed to evacuate before the disaster, likely warned by preceding earthquakes. Despite compelling evidence linking the Minoan civilization and the Santorini volcano to the Atlantis narrative, this hypothesis faces criticism. Some scholars note that Plato described Atlantis as a vast island located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, not the Mediterranean Sea. His descriptions differ from the characteristics of Santorini and the Minoans in many crucial aspects. Furthermore, the eruption times significantly differ from those indicated by Plato, who claimed Atlantis sank 9,000 years before his era. Another serious hypothesis attempting to explain the origins of the Atlantis legend is related to the Black Sea and the well-known flood myth. This theory emerged in the late 20th century, drawing wide interest among researchers as it relied on actual geological studies and verified archaeological data. In 1997, American geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed a revolutionary theory, later detailed in their book about the flood and new discoveries that changed history. According to their hypothesis, around 7,500 years ago, a catastrophic flooding occurred in the area now known as the Black Sea. In those times, it was a significantly smaller freshwater lake surrounded by fertile lands where ancient agricultural cultures thrived. Following the end of the last ice age, a global rise in sea levels caused the Mediterranean Sea to burst through a natural land bridge where the modern Bosporus Strait now exists. In a short time, massive amounts of salt water surged into the freshwater basin, causing the water level to rise rapidly and submerge vast fertile valleys. This flooding became a true ecological and humanitarian disaster for numerous settlements in the region. It's believed that the water level in the Black Sea might have risen by 150 meters in a relatively short period, forcing thousands of people to leave their homes forever. Ryan and Pittman suggest this event became the historical prototype for many ancient flood myths found across Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures. Biblical flood narratives, myths of the ancient Greeks, and many other legends might contain distant memories of a catastrophe when an extensive inland sea destroyed a thriving settlement of ancient people. But how does this connect to Atlantis? Some researchers propose that historical sources from ancient Greece and Egypt, used by Plato to create his myth of Atlantis, might share a common origin linked directly to the Black Sea disaster. Perhaps the memory of the tragedy was passed down orally for centuries, evolving and enriching with new details. Plato, having heard this story in a modified form, could have significantly expanded its scope and placed Atlantis in the distant Atlantic Ocean. Supporting this theory is the fact that the territory surrounding the ancient Black Sea was inhabited by highly developed agrarian cultures that outpaced many regional peoples in terms of advancement during that period. Archaeological excavations in modern Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey confirm the existence of ancient settlements that disappeared suddenly and catastrophically. Many of these settlements are currently being discovered by archaeologists at the bottom of the Black Sea, submerged at depths of several dozen meters. However, The Black Sea hypothesis faces criticism. Opponents argue that the events described by Plato occurred much earlier than the flood of the Black Sea, which happened about 7,500 years ago, while Plato spoke of a time 9,000 years before his existence. Moreover, Plato clearly identified the location of Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, not near the Black Sea. Nevertheless, the theory proposed by Ryan and Pittman remains one of the most scientifically grounded and recognized hypotheses regarding the origin of the sunken civilization myth. It effectively demonstrates how real natural disasters could transform into mythological and epic stories preserved over millennia, inspiring ancient authors. Another fascinating theory explaining the possible real roots of the Atlantis legend involves the idea of an asteroid impact leading to a global catastrophe. This version appeared relatively recently, but quickly attracted scientific attention due to solid geological and archaeological arguments. The notion that the myth of Atlantis' demise might reflect memories of a catastrophic celestial body impact was actively discussed in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Proponents of this hypothesis argue that ancient flood myths and the Atlantis story could have survived in people's memories after Earth's collision with a significant cosmic object in the distant past. One of the most well-known of these theories is posited by an American geologist and archaeologist, along with other researchers linking the disappearance of some ancient cultures to the so-called Younger Dryas event. This period, which occurred about 12,500 years ago, was marked by abrupt and dramatic climate change on Earth, a return to glacial conditions in the northern hemisphere, and a global temperature drop. For a long time, the cause of these changes remained a mystery to scientists. However, in recent decades, a theory emerged suggesting that the global catastrophe could have resulted from the impact of a large asteroid or comet. This assumption is based on numerous geological studies revealing thin layers of minerals and substances, such as iridium and microscopic diamonds, found in deposits worldwide. These data indicate a significant collision with a cosmic object that triggered widespread fires, tsunamis, earthquakes, and a sharp cooling of the climate due to dust and soot lofted into the atmosphere. Supporters of this theory believe such a collision could have led to the instantaneous destruction of many human settlements and a drastic population decline over large areas. These events, some researchers argue, formed the basis for flood myths and subsequently the legend of Atlantis. The aftermath of the impact would have been so dramatic that the memory of it could have been transmitted from generation to generation, gradually becoming embellished with mythological and fantastic details. Archaeological evidence also supports the hypothesis of a sudden and unexplained decline of certain ancient cultures, such as the Clovis culture in North America and other late Paleolithic hunting communities. Studies have shown that these cultures, which reached a significant level of development, disappeared suddenly and almost simultaneously. Scientists link this phenomenon to the catastrophic consequences of a cosmic collision that led to drastic environmental changes and a decline in resources necessary for survival. Additionally, proponents of the theory note that memories of such catastrophes might have persisted in other ancient cultures. For instance, myths about global disasters with fiery rains, massive waves, and prolonged cooling appear in the legends of indigenous peoples from America, Asia, and Europe. Researchers believe the widespread nature of these tales indicates a common historical source, specifically the events of the Younger Dryas and the related cosmic cataclysm. Despite the compelling arguments, the cosmic collision hypothesis faces skepticism among scientists. Some researchers point out that direct evidence of an asteroid or comet impact of that scale hasn't been found yet. There's no clearly identified crater or other convincing physical evidence of this event. Critics note that although extraterrestrial materials have been discovered, they could be explained by other phenomena, like smaller cosmic events or volcanic catastrophes. Nevertheless, the asteroid impact hypothesis remains one of the most intriguing and widely debated theories, explaining the origins of the legend of Atlantis and other ancient accounts of global catastrophe. With the advancement of modern technologies, the legend of Atlantis has gained new life. While researchers previously relied solely on ancient texts and surface finds, they now possess unique tools for thoroughly exploring the ocean floor and uncovering traces of ancient civilizations at significant depths. One of the most significant technologies that changed the approach to studying underwater objects is satellite geodesy and sonar mapping of the seafloor. These technologies enable the creation of detailed maps of oceanic relief with high precision. By the end of the 20th century, satellites equipped with high-precision radars could first explore large areas of the ocean floor in detail. Using these tools, structures resembling ancient city ruins, roads, walls, and even pyramids have been discovered in various ocean regions. These findings sparked speculation that these objects might be linked to the mythical Atlantis. The most well-known discoveries in recent years include underwater structures off the coasts of Japan, Cuba, and Spain. These finds created a sensation and sparked active discussions among scholars and enthusiasts. Particularly famous became the structure of the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. In 1986, local divers accidentally discovered mysterious stone formations resembling platform steps, which many immediately interpreted as the remnants of an ancient sunken city. Research confirmed the existence of massive stone formations. Various opinions exist regarding the origins of the different objects that appear quite artificial. Some Atlantis theorists believe these are remnants of a submerged ancient civilization, possibly linked to the Atlanteans. However, official scientific circles exercise caution regarding such claims. Geologists suggest that the structures at Yonaguni formed naturally due to erosion and tectonic processes. They argue that proper geometric shapes can occur in nature and provide numerous examples of similar natural formations in various parts of the world. Despite this, debates about the origins of the monuments in Yonaguni continue. In the early 2000s, another sensational discovery occurred off the coast of Cuba. Canadian researchers Paulina Zalitsky and Paul Weinzweig found unusual structures with clear geometric shapes at depths of about 600 to 700 meters off the coast of the Guanahatabibes Peninsula. These forms resembled streets, squares, buildings, and even pyramids made of large stone blocks. This discovery immediately attracted the attention of Atlantis theorists, who viewed it as direct evidence of a highly developed ancient civilization. However, the depth of these structures raises many questions for scientists. Geologist Manuel Turralde, who participated in the initial research, noted that for such constructions to exist at their current depth, they must have been built at least 50,000 years ago. This sharply contradicts all known data from modern archaeology about the development of human cultures. Therefore, official scientists lean toward the opinion that these formations likely have a natural origin, although there isn't a unified stance on this issue within the scientific community. Due to the lack of further major research and the inaccessibility of the site, the question remains open. Equally interesting underwater formations have been discovered off the coast of Spain, near the Strait of Gibraltar. Satellite images and sonar research revealed strange structures on the seafloor resembling walls, roads, and lines crafted by human hands. These findings also fueled theories about a sunken civilization near the mythical Pillars of Hercules mentioned by Plato. However, the scientific community maintains a cautious approach, believing these structures could have formed naturally due to underwater currents and erosion. Modern studies of the seafloor show that it indeed harbors numerous mysterious formations that at first glance appear man-made and evoke associations with Atlantis. Nevertheless, most of these objects are currently explained by geological processes and natural phenomena. Despite this, the discoveries continue to inspire researchers and mystery enthusiasts for new investigations, leaving hope for remarkable revelations. Alongside serious scientific attempts to explain the myth of Atlantis, a range of pseudo-scientific and alternative theories has always existed, adding a vivid and fantastical character to the legend. While the scientific community traditionally views such hypotheses with skepticism and even irritation, they enjoy immense popularity among the general public. This popularity stems not only from natural human curiosity, but also from the desire to explain the unknown through mysterious and appealing images of the supernatural and extraterrestrial. One of the most well-known and popular alternative hypotheses claims that Atlantis was a colony of an extraterrestrial civilization that existed on Earth thousands of years ago. This idea gained widespread popularity thanks to authors like Erich von Däniken and Zecharia Sitchin. According to them, the Atlanteans were either aliens or hybrids of humans and aliens who imparted technology far superior to modern advancements to humanity. Supporters of such theories often cite ancient depictions of beings in spacesuits or spacecraft on the walls of Egyptian temples, ancient South American pyramids, and even cave paintings by primitive people. However, it's important to note that all these claims are based solely on speculation and incorrect interpretations of the images. Another popular version relates to so-called portals and interdimensional passages. Proponents of this theory believe that Atlantis didn't just disappear due to a catastrophe, but was shifted to another dimension using portal or space-time tunnel technologies. In this case, Atlantis remains a living and thriving civilization, simply inaccessible to modern humanity. These ideas are actively supported by esoteric authors and various mystical movements, viewing Atlantis as a symbol of an ideal society hidden from the eyes of ordinary people. The third common group of pseudo-scientific theories asserts that the Atlanteans possess technologies that modern science can't even imagine. Supporters of these hypotheses are convinced that Atlantis was a super civilization far ahead of its time possessing anti-gravity, crystalline energy sources, and complex devices capable of controlling climate and tectonic processes. The scientific community views these versions with deep skepticism and criticism. Researchers consider such hypotheses speculative and completely unproven, as they lack support from archaeological finds or credible evidence that could withstand scientific scrutiny. Moreover, these theories often rely on arbitrary interpretations of ancient images and texts, as well as manipulation of facts and outright fabrications. So why are these hypotheses so popular, despite clear skepticism from scholars? Firstly, people have always shown interest in the mysterious and unknown, trying to explain unusual phenomena through mystical and fantastic ideas. Atlantis fits perfectly into this approach, representing an ancient civilization that vanished without a trace, making it easy to add any desired fantastical details. Secondly, alternative hypotheses successfully exploit the public's thirst for sensationalism and mysteries. Such versions are much easier for a broad audience to accept than complex scientific explanations. The idea of ancient astronauts or mysterious portals is more appealing to the masses than the meticulous research of archaeologists or geologists. Finally, pseudo-scientific theories often exploit the human desire to believe in older, wiser, and more perfect civilizations, capable of solving modern problems. In this context, Atlantis becomes the perfect society to rediscover and use as a source of knowledge and inspiration. Currently, professional scholars maintain a cautious and reserved attitude toward the legend of Atlantis. After centuries of debate and research, they've reached a consensus that, in the form described by Plato, Atlantis probably never existed. However, this doesn't diminish the myth's significance. On the contrary, for archaeologists, historians, and geologists, Atlantis has become an important symbol, allowing the study of historical processes, ancient catastrophes, and the mechanisms of myth creation. Archaeologists examine the legend of Atlantis through a strict scientific methodology. Modern archaeological research doesn't support the existence of a civilization like that described by Plato on any island or continent in the Atlantic Ocean. Despite numerous attempts to find the ruins of Atlantis, there is no scientifically validated archaeological evidence linking the myth to a real city or civilization. Nonetheless, archaeologists emphasize that the search for Atlantis has provided a powerful impetus to study previously lesser-known cultures and ancient settlements, such as the Minoans in Crete, the mysterious Guanches in the Canaries, or ancient world cultures. The legend of Atlantis has proven to be a significant catalyst for serious scientific research. Today, most historians view Atlantis as an allegory created by Plato to convey his philosophical ideas. They believe the philosopher used real historical events and cultural memories from Mediterranean peoples, weaving them into a vivid and instructive narrative. In this sense, Atlantis has become a philosophical parable, illustrating moral lessons about vanity, the downfall of civilizations, and the consequences of losing morality. Researchers are interested in how ancient peoples preserved memories of real events, such as natural disasters or wars, passing them down through generations and transforming them into myths. Geologists have also significantly contributed to the study of Atlantis. Modern geological research indicates that a large island or continent in the center of the Atlantic Ocean couldn't have disappeared in a short historical period without substantial and noticeable consequences. Ocean floor studies using modern technologies have found no evidence of a submerged continent in this region. Nevertheless, geological data has provided scientists with valuable information about other ancient catastrophes that might have inspired the myth of Atlantis. For instance, the catastrophic volcanic eruption in Santorini, devastating floods and tsunamis in the Mediterranean, and the flooding of the Black Sea after the Ice Age had massive consequences and could have left a lasting imprint on the collective memory. In contemporary science, Atlantis serves as a vivid example of how myths are born and how real events transform into legends, gaining symbolic significance and moral lessons. Scholars emphasize that the legend's popularity is due to its reflection of universal fears related to the downfall of civilizations, loss of moral direction, and the unpredictability of natural disasters. For over 2 millennia, the story of Atlantis has inspired and intrigued people, evolving from Plato's philosophical dialogues to modern scientific research and fantastical hypotheses. It's possible that Atlantis was a real ancient civilization, the memory of which survived in myths, but it could also be simply a parable created for reflection on the consequences of pride and greed. Perhaps it symbolizes the fragility of our world in the face of natural disasters and unexpected changes. Today, we possess enough knowledge to understand how myths become part of human history, but Atlantis is special. It reflects fears, hopes, and dreams of a lost ideal. What does Atlantis represent for you? A real yet undiscovered civilization, a profound philosophical lesson, or just an intriguing story? I leave this question open for your contemplation.